something I definitely would recommend, which is House of the Dragon season 1, wrapping up on HBO last night to pretty big returns. 9.3 million tuning in for this. Pretty good turnout for it.
Yeah. Averaging about hair under 30 million per episode when you count, all the replays and throughout the course of a week. I believe that's pacing ahead of all but two Game of Thrones seasons average, episode run. So biggest show on TV right now. I really didn't have any doubt the House of the Dragon would be a smash for HBO, but I'm still happy that it was. And I think season two will be even bigger once that does eventually come out. Maybe not till 2024, unfortunately. But yeah, monster hit, in the face of strong competition. Rings of Power on Amazon, Andor on Disney Plus. Not to mention just the wealth of choice we have in the world in general. House of the Dragon really struck through and became a zeitgeisty Sunday night show as we expected as the first proper Game of Thrones follow up.
Absolutely. And I think I don't think this was a perfect season of TV. I think there were some choices in terms of storytelling that maybe could have been thought out a little bit more. I think there's definitely um, some things that I think could have gone a little bit better. But overall, I was incredibly pleased with what we got this season, and especially the last few episodes. I think from the eighth, ninth, and 10th episode were probably the strongest parts of the season, all happening within a much shorter period of time, which I think might speak to some of the larger structural issues with the beginning of the show. And
Mhm.
we talked about the premiere, where you have these two young girls, Millie Haycock and
Millie Alcock and Emily
Millie Alcock.
Carey is young
Thank you.
Rhaenyra, young Allison, and there's other young actors as well, like the guy who plays young Laenor, for example. But yeah, unlike Game of Thrones, you have recasting happening mid-season as large passages of time are communicated episode to episode as we truly advance through pieces of time in story. And I think that is a hard thing to communicate because I think the alternative is a bit uh, unrealistic, which would be to spend more and more time over the course of, these earlier years. But they clearly don't want to make a 10 season show. So you kind of got to keep it moving as best you can. And, I thought Millie Alcock and Emily Carey were really great as young Rhaenyra and young Allison. And they do a really good job, I think, of setting that table and making that effectively prologue to that first season of House of the Dragon. They make it incredibly compelling and I think do a lot of the important work to set up the layered relationship that Alicent and Rhaenyra have. But at the end of the day, you do kind of have to advance it. And I think thankfully, because the casting was so dynamite, like once Emma Darcy comes in, and of course Olivia Cook, who we know is great, once they come in and just pick up the pieces from the young ones, the show just keeps rolling, And yeah, it's been interesting to hear people of various levels in their Thrones fandom like dissect and analyze like how they feel about a show that's really briskly moving through some early plot. And, you know, I don't know how much better it could have been done without just spending lots and lots of more time taking your time. But if that wasn't an option, I guess what could they have truly done differently? What do you think? Because I do agree with some of that criticism where some of the characterization is a bit brisk or a bit thin
Mhm.
with some of the ancillary characters. You kind of have to be following those core characters and picking up some other stuff through brief pieces of dialogue to follow through. Like, I understand it's a challenge for some, but I mean, do you have like a suggestion of how it could have been handled like a meaningful way in a different manner?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think especially because I haven't read the books, but I think where I was feeling like we would miss things is how from like one episode to the next there would be these feelings. Like I think it's like episode 3 or 4 where it's like right after Alicent is named the queen, and the next time we see Rhaenyra, she's kind of being like put out to find a husband, and there's definitely
Mhm.
this like tension between them, but like still this like this longing and this sweetness for their friendship. And I wish we could have just gotten even like little like scenes of them like still like having these nice moments or still like discussing their like care for other people. I think also a lot of the stuff that happens with Petty Constantine as King Viserys, it's major jumps of him like just getting sicker and sicker, although
Yeah.
somehow like still hanging on like that. That was like the most dead alive guy I've ever seen for
Yep.
like 3 episodes. Just incredible, incredible stuff from their makeup department. But yeah, I don't know if there's a way to have done it better. Um, but definitely, I think because it jumped so much, it almost feels like there could have been a whole season, which, like you said, they didn't want to do, of them just doing the younger ones, and people would have loved it. People
Of
were
course.
even saying like the two young ones, Emily Carey and Millie Alcock, they wanted them to just remain the characters throughout. And it's like obviously you can't do that when these are about adults, but it's
Right.
pretty impressive that they gave that good of a performance. And then you jump forward, and Emma Darcy and Olivia Cook are completely beloved as well by the fan base. Like
Yeah.
they just nailed the casting in all this.
Really, and they both really feel like the character. Like that's the young one,
Yeah.
that's the adult one. Like they both versions of both characters were great. And yeah, and I think something that like I think people just might have to accept over time is that like we are going to slow down with the passage of time from this point out. They wanted House of the Dragon to be palace intrigue with even more Game
Mhm.
of Thrones spectacle because that is what this story in the lore supports. That's why it was such an intelligent and smart choice for a first adaptation because there's so many familiar aspects to it, but they can bring in late period Game of Thrones budgets and immediately wow you with that. And as we dive into the Dance with Dragons, as Damon outlined in the season 1 finale, there are now 12 dragons on the board.
Mhm.
Shit's about to get hot. And maybe some people will be like, yeah, but I don't have any relationship with Aegon, the new king. Okay, fine. I guess then that's disappointing to hear. But for me, I found it all this like so credible and so amazing to follow. Maybe that's just because I'm just invested in the story. Like for me, like I wasn't like longing for a character to root for. It's like,
Yeah.
man, I'm rooting for the Game of Thrones, man. Like, I already know what these stakes are. That's why this is the prequel and the first choice as an adaptation, because we know what the stakes are. They are fighting for the throne. This is family on family. We know all this shit. We will get attached to people over time. I wasn't like, when some people were like saying how they like had no attachment to Rhaenyra, I was just like so shocked by that.
Mhm.
I thought and that's what's cool about this show and this group of characters is a lot more gray found in here, right?
Yes.
There are a lot of, perhaps you can call back to people, right? Like Allison, I think, has been made a bit less villainous than she is on the page, but still can remind you of Cersei in terms of her love of her family and her, her children. And Damon certainly has a lot of uh, ups and downs to his character, right? Familiar he's like a Jamie Lannister type. Like we know what we're supposed to feel, I think, about some of these characters, and now just like seeing it get to it, Like I don't know about you, but like once we got to our final timeline here and we see like adult Aemond fucking menacing with his one eye,
Oh yeah.
perfect. I get it. And I think they actually, with very economically, because there's only so much time as they move through plot, but like the way they set up Aemond as like the more driven, focused brother,
Mhm.
uh, and the way he handles losing his eye in the way he did as a youth, right? But being like, yeah, but I got Vagar now, so good trade. Like the way
Yeah.
he was able to say that as a teenager, like I think they've done a really good job of communicating some of that stuff. Are we as attached to Rhaenyra's other kids? With Harwin Strong, Jace, and Luke. Not as much. We haven't had as much time with them, or their betrothed. Damon's Valerian kids. No, right? We haven't spent as much time with them yet. But I think that like kind of central force that is the Greens versus the Targaryens. You know, to me that's been enough as like kind of our grounding like sides of the two sides of the conflict to drive everything forward. And season 2 you would think would just slow down with that time and there'd be less of that like forward pushing of plot, and then you'd really stick with the characters that we largely know. And obviously there'll be allies, there'll be lots of other houses coming into the fray, but we know all the major players, and this was, I think, a effective setup.
Yeah, I thought all those characters were fantastic. Eamon, so like you said, so menacing, and the guy playing him, I wanted to find his name, and I was having a hard time looking on my notes. I thought was just fantastic, and like you said, I think some of the best episodes are the ones where like I don't want to say the least happens, but it's like it's like more bottled up, right? Where it's like you're
Hmm.
focusing on like one event. So like when Eamon loses his eye, right? You have the now they see you for who you truly are moment between Rhaenyra and Alicent. And that
Amazing.
showdown is just incredible. Like it's just so intense, and you see not only how Viserys fails as a leader and as a king, but you
Hmm.
see like the dynamic between these two friends, these foes politically. It's like so intense and so well constructed. And yeah, that the way that Emma Darcy delivers that line is just
Right.
incredible.
Also, like the fact that that scene hit so well, and yet like Olivia Cook running with the dagger was in the trailer,
Yeah.
and didn't spoil anything. It still was an amazing moment that still landed.
Hmm. Incredible. And then obviously, like I said, you get the last few episodes, starting with episode 8, you get the kind of coming back together, the long walk, which might have been like that whole throne room scene is
Oh yeah.
incredible, but like the long walk is so moving. Damon, who's like this brutal character, but someone you also root for. I think Matt Smith plays him very well. Portrays a very complex and like
Yes.
wounded person. Is really impressive. But then you get an amazing moment from him where apparently this wasn't in the script, but the when the crown falls off Viserys' head, Damon puts it on him, and that wasn't written. Matt
Mm.
Smith just did that, which is really cool. And then him cutting the head off the guy. It's just
Yeah.
like
The
what a
sea
moment.
snake's brother. Amazing.
Uh, Amazing
Can
stuff.
have your tongue.
Yep, but then you get the showdown between the kids, but also like the Alicent and Rhaenyra coming back together, and then obviously shit goes down where you get
Ugh.
the vision shared to the wrong person.
Fucking Viserys really going out like the
He,
ineffectual leader he was at the
he
very
brought
last
them
moment. And that's to
together
get one
too,
more in.
and he just fucked it up. But then yeah, seeing the green side of things and then the red side of things in the last two episodes, I thought those both those episodes were incredible. I really liked it during in the ninth episode where you see the High Towers making a play for the throne,
Mm-hmm.
um, and taking the throne. How like you're in the city and you're kind of learning a little bit more about like the inner workings. I wish we'd actually seen a little bit more of that, because there's like the scene where like the brothel woman is like, "Well, I'll tell you where he is if you work in this political agenda to stop like making kids fight each other." And I was like,
Yeah.
"This is
Mm-hmm.
really cool, actually." Like, I wish we kind
Totally.
of got a little bit more of this, but
Yeah.
there's not a lot of room for that in the Dance of Dragons, I
You would
suppose.
have wanted to go on more drunken escapades in Flea Bottom with Aegon. I don't want to be king. Uh, Targaryen.
I don't know about Aegon per se, but I would have liked to have seen like how these people of the city are getting there, like using the power that they have, the information that they have to like sway some political leanings. I think there's something there for
Right.
a show in the future.
I think there's definitely more room along those lines for like the Missaria side of things. Sonia Mizuno had a tough accent a few episodes back.
Yeah.
Not her best for sure, but that's always, I think, been a strength of Game of Thrones, which was people not in power and how they interface with the world. And that's why
Hmm.
Westeros and Song of Ice and Fire has always been so rich, is because it feels so real and there's so many different people, and the approximation of people from and to power is what is ultimately so compelling. And that is probably something that got the short shrift the most as House of the Dragon season 1 had to advance through so much time and so much plot.
Hmm.
But you know it still like felt like, yeah, even if you view this season as the highlight reel, like there's some fucking amazing ass highlights, man. I don't know how you
Mhm.
can't be entertained, you know. And
Yeah.
Patty Considine in general throughout the season is really great as Viserys and has to do a lot as his character really transforms literally and he has to change the way he's acting in the role, obviously. And I think the show does a good job of communicating what kind of leader he was and what kind of man he was, where he was not the despot like Mega the Cruel, and he ruled over a time of peace, but
Mhm.
he wasn't a good king for other reasons. And they show you and they do that work to communicate that. And you see it
Yeah.
on both sides. You see it on the green side of things. You see it on the red side of things with Damon's view of things, you know? Uh, yeah, man, there's just so much to like. I think really all the casting was tremendous. Even like we get the revelation about Laris and how Alicent was doing him a favor to get information. Like I thought that is even set up in a really effective way. Obviously, it's a huge shock when you see the stuff with the feet, but like, and it's a big moment online. But like, I just think like they did a lot of work to kind of build up that Laris character and that Laris Alicent relationship, right? Conversely, like early on, you're like pretty invested with Sir Kristen Cole with young
Mhm.
Rhaenyra. And then they really show you what kind of thug he is and how he's
Yeah.
just
Just a
a goon.
goon.
He's a goon, and that's how he is on the page. And I mean, I think he's already rapidly risen up the rankings of most loathed Thrones character by many, and I think that's great. Fabian Frankel did a really good job.
Yeah, he did a fantastic job, and like seeing all of the like scenes where he's just like a complete piece of shit, but he's like so brooding. You know, he's
Yeah.
similar to like the Mountain, I guess, or something like that, right? Where it's
Hmm.
just like this big goon, but
Also, quite
like
misogynistic now towards
yeah,
Rhaenyra.
just terrible. Um, I think I agree. I think for the limited time they had and all the characters, they did a really good job of characterizing it, and you still get some awesome set pieces, man. I mean, like I thought the end of episode 9, where Renice, who
Oh
is
yeah,
maybe like the most underrated character this season, and her presence I feel like is
crushes it at the end too when
so
she gets some
crucial.
more scenes.
Yeah, so the last 2 episodes, she's fantastic. Where, Rhaenys on her dragon bursts up, could have just fucking flamed all the high towers right there and
One
just
and done show, one
I
season.
know. I know. But then I actually felt like they made a pretty good like pitch as to why she didn't when she
Hmm.
talks to Rhaenyra. It's like it wasn't my war to start. Like,
True.
this is really you. I was like, "Oh, okay, like fair enough."
Yeah.
Um and then yeah, in the final episode, the way that she was talking with the sea snake and just kind of like being like, she's the only one that's not fucking going into battle immediately. Like, I think she's actually a good leader. I was like, yeah, making some good points here. I thought all that stuff was
Yep.
really effective. And also I really liked the conversation between her and her husband about like what is the point of doing all this? Like, what are they actually like fighting for? And how their goals weren't really aligned. I thought that was really interesting. And we haven't really talked about just some of the other cool moments, but you get the Damon scenes where he like goes and kills the
The
crab
crab feed.
crab feeder. You get him singing to the dragon. You get him just kind of coming into
Hmm.
the feast and just stealing the show and making everybody uncomfortable.
Crown
It's
of
all good
thorns.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, all
Totally.
really good stuff.
Let's not forget, we got Thrones at its most Thronesiest. Straight up incest. It's back, baby. And
People are
we
cool with
love
this
it.
one.
We are rooting for it. And it's so funny that they have 3 sets of kids. It's so great. You, of course, have Rhaenyra's kids with Laenor, quote unquote. And then you have Daemon's kids, Valerian kids. And then they actually have their kids together. Shout out that mixed family.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all really fun, and I think if you're really like not liking this show, you just got a big old dump in your pants. Like you really just don't want to like it. Is what I feel.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's just so much familiarity to it. It's like you liked it last time, right? Like,
Hmm.
I understand maybe it's not completely fulfilling on the writing side of things for you just yet. I'd say they've earned some goodwill. That's
Yeah.
how I feel about it. And the name we were looking for was Ewan Mitchell is the one who
Yes.
plays adult Aemon Targaryen. And we should actually talk. How'd you feel about the death of
Luke.
Luke at the hands of Vagar and Aemond. Uh, I don't know about you, but like when I saw that, like I think they did a really good job of showing how Luke was still quite young throughout the later half of this season, and they really, I think, set it up well that things could have gone wrong. And sure enough, I don't know about you, but as soon as I saw him like kind of like flying in as a storm's coming in to land at Storm's End, I'm like, oh, this is not going to go well. And then
Oh
of
yeah,
course
well,
you immediately realize Eamon's already there, and it's like, yeah, he's toast.
yeah, yeah. With the when you see Vagar like screaming after he like hops off of Arax, you're like, oh fuck, this is not good. It felt Jurassic Parky almost, with like the
Right,
rain coming down, like, and the way that they shot that like chase at the end, so thrilling.
right.
And you go ahead.
Also, I think really intelligently and wisely, because we don't really know this yet. The average Thrones viewer hasn't really had this communicated yet, but the dragons are, we just kind of guide them. Those
They're
of us who are
beasts.
lucky enough to ride them, they are still nuclear bombs. So they're not you're not without consequences by using dragons as a weapon of war. And you saw that firsthand, where the way this show wants to communicate it anyway, whether I don't believe this is as clear on the page, but it seemed like the dragons both disobeyed their
Hmm.
riders, and thus that's why the two little ones got.
They both screamed at their dragon
Yeah,
respectively, serve me. Yeah, and Amon looked actually terrified. I don't know why I said his name like that. Amon. Look,
Aemond.
yeah. Looked
Amen.
absolutely terrified after, Vagar fucks him up, so,
Oh my
or
god.
she fucks him up, I should
Yeah.
say.
What a chomp, man, too.
Yo.
Brutal.
I honestly, that was a gutting scene. I felt so sad for Luke. I knew when he was just kind of sitting up there, I was like, "Oh, dude, you gotta keep moving. You gotta keep going." Like,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
definitely sets up a very exciting next season. That look on Emma Darcy's face. It's my background on YouTube. Check it out. But fucking brilliant.
Totally. Yeah, man. One thing I would love more of, I would love more Lenore. I actually really like Lenore and how they kind of set up the relationship, the arrangement that him and Rhaenyra have,
Hmm.
and I would love more time with him. They kept him alive on this show, which is a departure from the page. So I don't know if they're going to bring him back or not, but I would have liked more time with Lenore just because I think that there was a lot more there. Even Harwin Strong, we barely got to know him before
Hmm.
Laris kills him, but
Yeah,
I also liked him.
yeah, I agree. Agree with all of it. This is a great show.